webinar. My name is Alec. As always, I'm here in the background to help answer any of your general or technical questions that may pop up. But before we get started, I'd like to just take a moment and thank you all for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedules for another CLO webinar. I'm excited for today's event, but before we get started, you need to know a couple things about the console that you're in. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a chat. That is where you can chat with your fellow attendees. I see you in there, Jamie, Jennifer. I see you all in here right now. So jump in there. Let me know where you're joining from. I am producing today's show from the far southwest suburbs of Chicago. We got skirted by some nasty weather to our south last night. So if anybody in the audience is from a little south of here, hopefully you're all right. Yeah, hopefully we're getting some better weather on the way. But I see people in here from San Diego, Toronto, India, New Jersey, Manitoba. All right, great. So thank you all for jumping in there. That is where you can interact with your fellow attendees. You can chat with our presenter. He will be keeping an eye on that here and there throughout. Again, that is the chat for you all. On the right of the chat, you should see a button that says Q&A. That's where you can submit some private questions. If you have a question, maybe you don't want it known that you're asking it, or if it's a tech question, submit it in that Q&A tab. Just click there and you can submit it there, and we'll pull some questions from there towards the end of the presentation if we do have time. If you run into any tech issues, let me know in that Q&A tab. I'll be able to work with you directly there to get things sorted for you. Today's webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link to that recording in a follow-up email, so keep an eye on your inbox for that. Your HRCI and SHRM certification codes for today's event will also come in that follow-up. So again, if you are looking for those certification codes, those will come to you post-event. All right, so I'm happy to be joined by today's sponsors over at GP Strategies. I've had the pleasure of working on these webinars with GP Strategies for years, dating back to 2015. It seems like maybe even earlier than that. So it is always a pleasure for me to have the team at GP Strategies joining us. And if you don't know, GP Strategies is the learning velocity company amplifying your people's potential at the speed of opportunity. You're going to hear a little bit more about them today, and I know our presenter has a great presentation lined up. And getting to our presenter, that is Jeff Fissel. You can see him on the screen right now. Jeff is the VP of Technology over at GP Strategies, and like I said, he's got a great presentation lined up for you all today, so that's enough from me. I'm going to let Jeff get into the content. So Jeff, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alec. Really appreciate the time, and I'm excited to be here with you all today. It's I saw some people from Washington, D.C. in the chat. That's awesome. That's where I'm usually based. Today, I'm actually in Troy, Michigan at our office there. So it's always, I was joking with Alec, it's always fun kind of doing a webinar on not your home setup. I have a laptop on a box at a conference room where people might walk in, they might not. So we're going to have some fun together. And what I'm going to walk you through today here is this little bit of this concept of the idea of context, and specifically kind of context engineering, and how we think that's actually going to help scale the use of AI. And I have a joke with myself. I'm going to try to give a presentation that talks about AI, but I'm going to try really hard to not use the word AI that much. So you all can keep track for me. Let me know how I'm doing. And feel free to ask questions throughout, so we can go through a lot of different things. But before we jump in, just in the chat, I'm sort of curious. And is anyone, if you want to admit it, in vulnerable moment here, like who here's heard of the concept of context engineering or context in regards to AI or use of AI? All right, we got a couple people. Yes, all right. We have a good group. I like this. This is great. It's such a spectrum we're always on of this journey of how kind of AI plays into this. So let me kind of click into this, and here we go. So, of course, I think I should probably introduce myself. As you mentioned, I have the privilege of being the Vice President of Technology. But the lens I'll be kind of looking at this on, I sort of self-described sometimes as a failed developer. I have a degree from an engineering school. I was a programmer at one point in my career. I helped start a technology company. It turns out I was the weakest of all the programmers that started it. And I had to go into the business side of things. But that lens of like solutioning and how you think about applying technology to solve a problem is really what I'm going to be talking with you about today. And give you some ideas of some frameworks to start to shape that thinking of context. I see some good quotes in there already. Context is more important than content. That's a question, but yes, we will answer that question for sure. So, but I want to start on this journey of this promise. I think if most of the people here are in the L&D world, the promise that we've always kind of chased is that learning can be personalized and adaptive at scale. And that's the goosebumpy moment of like, oh, I want it to be exactly what I want in this moment for me, deliver the right moment of learning need. All of those kind of things play in. But we've always had these kind of three constraints: speed, relevance, and quality. And it was usually, the answer was pick one or maybe two, but you could never get all three. Getting all three of these would be almost impossible in a lot of ways. You had to sacrifice one. But I do think in the world that we're dealing with now, we can start to scratch at this. We have an ability to be able to get to all three of these things that will drive us to that improved performance and all the benefits that we have on that side of it. And I think one of the big shifts, if we think about the idea of content and that we need to think about, is that content won't be authored first or ahead of time. It's going to be generated at the point of need, because if we're going to hit all three of those things, it will have to be. We can't pre-create this kind of concept of all the content. It would be millions of pieces of content we'd be creating, and they'd be kind of ephemeral in a way. Like they would go off in different ways. So this would be kind of this mindset of moving from the concept of a conveyor belt of pre-authored content to dynamic assembly at the point of consumption. So what do I need in that moment for that learning intervention or activity that I'm doing, whether it's the first moment I'm learning something or a performance support moment later in those needs. I think this is kind of a really important thing that we need to get to. And I see our ability to get there. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we get there, and I even show you some demos of kind of how we can think about that. But before we get there, the real risk here is that if we're going to use AI to do this, when AI lacks context, it produces confident and generic slop. I imagine most people on this webinar have probably seen it. You're like, you get past the party trick and you read the words and you're like, oh no, those aren't great words. And even like the scary bit here is before, like, I'll call it sloppy slop. Like slop was pretty easy to spot. Like we could see it. We're like, oh, like punctuation was wrong, grammar was wrong. It wasn't saying the right things. But now we're in this world of like crisp, beautifully written slop that makes it much harder for us to spot and do that. So how do we kind of, if this is the world we're living in, how do we start to deal with this idea of like trust that we have to kind of build into those systems? So this is context. And I believe the concept of context engineering is how we're going to do there. Good slop is still slop. Yes. And that's great. Like we can't have slop. We'll lose learners' trust if in this moment, if we start to allow slop to get out there and under the guise of learning or learning interventions or any of those sort of things. So when we think about what is context engineering, for everyone that said yes, they know about it. For those who don't, a really simple definition here might be deciding what an AI tool or tech or model or prompt, what it sees, when it sees it, and in what shape it sees that information. And I'm going to give us a little more of a framework to kind of think about what that is. So if we think about this, like you can't give a good presentation to a group of people like without using an iceberg graphic. So here's my iceberg graphic presentation here. Prompting is just one element of this. Context is actually like the system that's below it that is going to give the tooling and everything that we use all the right information to go. And one of those pieces of information is going to be the data it's working with. I see in the chat the garbage in, garbage out kind of concept. Like that's very much true. And we need to think about engineering to the systems that we build to not necessarily allow that garbage in. So why do we care about this? We hit the slot part of it. But we also have this other kind of problem that we've seen is and I imagine a lot of people have seen it. Feel free to add in the chat if you've seen this. Like same tool, same model, plus different context equals wildly different outcomes. This was the problem with kind of prompt libraries and some of those kind of early adapts of, hey, everyone take the prompt, paste it into your Copilot, and you'll get a similar outcome. But what happened was you actually didn't, because the context around it changed. Let's say you use Copilot inside of your work environment. If Copilot has the ability to look across your SharePoint sites, I have yet to meet a single organization that's like, yep, I got a super well organized SharePoint site to work with. And because of the different permissions of what people have access to, that's going to drive these different outcomes. So one of the things we need to get to is consistency, and context engineering those elements is going to help us get to those kind of different consistent outputs. So what counts as context? So I want to give us kind of a framework and some words to think about. So the first is going to be instruction, knowledge, state, tools, and policies. And if we look at this in kind of a slightly different way, if our goal is to get to an amazing, great learning experience, if we think about instructions are the prompts. It's the goal. What are you trying to do? Maybe some of the constraints of how do you get there. The knowledge is the approved facts and sources that you use it, that garbage in, garbage out concept of like, what is the tool allowed to use? Is it allowed to go to the internet and find stuff? Is it only able to use this one OneDrive folder or just this one PDF? Like, what is the approved knowledge that you want the tool to have? State is really important because no one wants to be taught something they already know. So what's happened so far? Maybe it's LMS data. Like what skills does someone have already? What courses have they taken? Where have they left off in an existing experience that they have? That's going to be needed to get to that kind of true personalization. Then you have the concept of policies. Like this is really governance. What shouldn't it do? What should it do? What are the rules that you're giving these agents to follow? And I think it's something we should be very clear and upfront with and document as we go through there. And then tools get into a little more of a technical term here, but this is this idea of what systems can it interact with? Is it allowed to go to my HRIS system and grab employee data? Is it allowed to go to my LMS? Is it allowed to do research tasks? What tools can the agents or AI tools that we're building kind of connect with? And you want to be deliberate about that. And you also want to set those things up, those systems up, so that, again, we can get to that kind of great experience. So hopefully this is tracking so far. Again, feel free to keep the questions coming. When I look to the side, I'm just glancing at the chat here. So we're doing well and kind of pushing right along here. So when we think about we have to start to architect that context into how we get to those quality, reliability, and scalability. So this isn't a simple thing. It's not going to happen by accident. And that's kind of the whole point of this presentation in a way, is to get you like, this is something that we need to be very deliberate about. And I think we can be the owners of this. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in kind of a second. So I do think we are going to shift from not just designing one-off type experiences, courses, SCOs, e-learning, ILTs, like that type of pieces of content, but we're actually going to move into designing the systems, the performance systems that are needed to push us forward. And I saw a comment in there from Jenna about like human in the loop. Like I think those are kind of really important components of where do you put those humans in these different systems that we're designing, and how do you move them around? Like it might initially start out that you need them in a lot of different places, but as you start to build trust and as we start to kind of push on here, you will find different places that you need those kind of deliberate human moments in there. But the pivot here is that it's a system. It's a systems way of thinking, because again, the content's not pre-created, so it's never done. So what data do these agents or tools start to have continuously so that they can always be relevant to what people need? All right. So I think us, and I'm a little biased here, but I think us in L&D and talent are actually very well set up to help our organizations through this process. We have connections to our partners in the people and HR side of the businesses. Some of us probably report into those thresholds. We have a lot of the technology or relationships into the HR or into the IT orgs that can start to enable this. And we understand the governance. And I want to reframe governance from just controls, but also examples of what does good look like. What is a good learning outcome that we need to? I think I saw a reference to Bloom's in there, or Kirkpatrick, maybe someone mentioned. What does a good learning intervention or learning experience mean? And I think we can bring that together to be able to get ourselves to this moment of delivering these performance systems that are there. Yeah. All right. What can AI do, not do? Exactly. This is absolutely kind of moving from that. So let's try to anchor this to a practical example we have. I imagine at least a couple people on this call, I think there's hundreds of us on here right now, have at least toyed with the idea of deploying some semblance of an AI coach. In this lens, we're going to talk about it as an AI sales coach. We want to better enable our sales teams to sell at a higher level, be better at what they're doing. So when we start to think about this, let's kind of deconstruct what we want a sales coach to do. And then we're going to get to what context is needed. So the goal of a coach or of a sales coach is one, to coach. There's probably some role play components in there of practice that go into it. There's some semblance of feedback from that role play. Like, hey, I did the role play. Like, did I do it well? Did I not do it well? What's the feedback that I need to get to those moments? And then that feeds into some sort of action plan. So what do I do from that? Do I go take learning? Do I practice again? Like, what happens? So let's think about like these different components and then what context is needed to be able to deliver a high quality experience that we do here. So I'm going to call this a context map. That's a technical term that a lot of people have used, but I'm going to kind of break down this idea of non-technical context and technical kind of things that we need to kind of wire in. So the first if we're thinking about kind of our sales coaching methodology and things that we have here, let's talk about the non-technical. How do we make it feel like it's relevant to the people that are taking it? What's the tone and style that it needs? What are your organization's goals and priorities? What's the sales methodology you use that's going to be relevant to the people going through it? What's the information about your products and offerings, the truth about that? Competitive comparison documents, product specs, maybe like recorded sales pitches of existing good ones and bad ones that are there. A listing of like trusted learning content that you would want that remediation step at the end of like, what do I develop or what do I do? Does it know what those are? Is it going to go just make that stuff up? What are any skill or performance signals that you might have? Like, is this a low performing rep or a high performing rep? Where are they in that cycle? Or are they about to trying to close a deal and they have this objection they're trying to do? And we want to focus just on that. That relevance kind of matters a lot to delivering that high quality experience. So you're not just in a generic, okay, sort of blah kind of experience. It's not like, and I think that's what we kind of move towards. So then we think about what technical things do we need to kind of bring in here to make this work at scale? The state data, the progress or history, where do they leave off? Like we all know of the SCORM and bookmarking that's been around for decades there. Like it turns out e-learning's got that pretty well sorted out, but a lot of the AI coaching and role play tools don't yet. That's not a thing they know of, like, where did you leave off? Where am I coming back into? What am I kind of doing with the history and progress of where I am? Structured outputs, like what are examples of good coaching feedback that we want? What are bad coaching feedbacks? Data labeling. This goes a little bit into maybe I'm trying to build a role player coaching tool myself using a Copilot agent or a Chat GPT. This is like, how do I know what data to use? what in my system? What's the good stuff in SharePoint? What's the most up-to-date file that I have? How do I know those elements that are there? And then like, when do I want to use retrieval? So you may or may not have heard of the concept of RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. And that's this idea of being able to grab information from in there, segments of that information, and use it as part of the work. Sometimes you might want the tools to do that. Other times you might not. And when's the right time to do that? A lot of the commercial off-the-shelf tools will manage that for you. But if you're going down the path of designing something yourself, it's definitely something you need to like think about as we kind of go through this. So let me, I'm going to look at the chat real quick here. What can AI do? Any questions around this sort of workflow? How does it make sense? Are we on the right path here? Yeah, I agree. AI can do predictive elements if you nudge it and give it the right context to do predictive stuff. But right now it's looking at historic data. It's trained off of historic data. So I think that is a very kind of a thing just to be mindful of and aware of as you start to roll things out. So a question on RAG. So and this can be really technical. So Jonathan, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to go deep. We can go real deep on this. But this is the concept of like, so you can't load all of your organization's data into the context window of an AI tool. Think of the context window as the chat thread. It's more technical than that. But what's in the chat? There's a limit to what's there. It's like what's in the short-term memory of the AI tool. You can't say know everything because there's not enough room in it to do it, and it wouldn't do that well. So then RAG is a tactic to grabbing relevant segments of information to embed into that context window, so that it can talk like you. It can have information that you need. So that's where data labeling is really important. So RAG knows it grabs the right information. One thing we've seen in a lot of cases, if you point it at your LMS, in a lot of cases, people have old or out-of-date courses in their LMS that might use old branding or old positioning or old competitor data, if we're sticking to this thread here. And AI doesn't know it's old. It's just grabbing the words. It doesn't know if they're good words or not. So labeling that matters so that when the tools use techniques like RAG to try to grab that context, that extra information that's there, it grabs the right information. You can almost think of it as like SEO for AI. Like, how are you helping AI guess better and grab the right relevant information you need? So hopefully that's helpful there. And again, we can go real deep on that. Okay, so do you have an opinion on strategy using AI chat models versus agentic agents? Well, so the LLM's the same either way, whether you're using an agent or a chat-based experience. Their interface is to interact with an LLM. There's simple agents, I'll say, and I have lots of presentations on this. I don't want to spend a ton of time. We can go a little deeper on and then maybe a follow-on conversation about it of like, hey, it has a prompt. It's like a Copilot simple one or a GPT. It's got a set of instructions and it does that one job that you do. But now we're into a world of agents and sub-agents and skills. If you're into like the Claude Code and Cowork world of the skills, like these agentic orchestrations of how does the agent start to call each other and start to do this work. And I think that can be a whole other thing. We could have a whole webinar on OpenClaw and all that fun stuff, but I won't go into that today. So I do want to share one more kind of example of this sort of in flow. And this is a prototype of a concept we're launching called the continuous learning agent. And I want to call out the components of context that add in here. So Alec, you might have to help me here. I'm just going to go ahead and click to share my screen and share the live demo part of this. And then I'll come back to the slide. So hopefully you can put that up full screen for me. Awesome. He's a pro. So this is this concept of a continuous learning agent. And the idea is that it can start to build that content at scale. So the first set of context that the tool would be aware of is the individual. Who is this person? This is Brett. What does Brett do? What are their focuses? What skills or knowledge or expertise do they have? This is, in theory, a feed from an HRIS system or some sort of talent management pool that's there. And then we have the semblance of, okay, I want to create a learning journey for Brett, or Brett wants to create one himself. Here he has the components of a knowledge basis. So this is the trusted, vetted knowledge that the organization says, we have enough information to teach Brett based on these topics that are here. So let's say we want Brett to work on some critical thinking skills as it relates to his role. So we happen to know Brett is a director of technology solutions. So I could say, hey, like, here are the learning objectives or outcomes that I want, but AI is actually pretty good at that. So let's think about what are some learning objectives or outcomes that Brett might want to do that are anchored to his role. He could edit this. This is, again, a human in the loop moment. There's then this component of like, okay, how do we want this to talk at Brett? Do we want it to be encouraging, direct, neutral, practical, theoretic, Socratic? Like, what is the type of learning that we want to do? What kind of settings do I want? And then I have the ability to kind of draft or kind of initialize this learning agent. So it kind of quickly says, and this is a live demo, so hopefully this works. We're gonna go on this journey together here. Hey, like, here's the learning objectives. Here's what I'm set up to teach you about. So let's get started. So it's going to say, hey, let me go based on that, design a learning path that could be relevant to you on this topic. So it built out the different topics and subtopics, like, again, well-labeled data that's there. And I can click on these and it'll start kind of generating that content for me. And you'll notice kind of a reasoning step added in here where it starts to embed that expertise of what does Brett care about, as this allows Brett as a super admin to engage. It's building that kind of personalization. So we're moving from that kind of generic content to truly personalized or adaptive kind of content that is there. And it will start to build out like, here's this confirmation bias. Let me kind of click into some moments to learn more about that. I can kind of click through these, and then maybe at this moment I want to dive deeper, or I want to simplify this, or I want a podcast on this topic. Let's go Notebook LM style. Everyone wants a podcast nowadays. Let's refactor that content into something like that. But then the magic starts to come is, okay, then evaluate me on these topics. Let's see where I am at of what I'm doing. It will start to generate those knowledge checks. I'll go ahead and let Brett fail a bunch of these things. That's there. I'll click a couple and let's see if I got that one right. Oh, I did. I got 2 of the 3 right. So what it will do is, again, generate that feedback. This is sort of aligned with those kind of coaching moments. It's going to analyze those results and it's going to say, okay, like, hey, great job. Here's where you got 2 of the 3. Like, here's some recommended next steps, or let's like kind of remediate through that. So this is kind of this idea of, hey, here's what needs to be reviewed. Here's your answer. Here's the correct answer. Here's the explanation. Let's kind of go deeper and generate a new kind of micro lesson on this. So you can really start to get in there. And I see the comment of, yeah, this is very text heavy. The videos and imagery are totally the next step to coming into this. We were very focused on making this kind of just make sure it writes good text. I'll say good words that are relevant to what that kind of role is. But again, you see me kind of walking through this process here and starting to kind of understand and then test myself again. So it's this continuous process as we kind of walk through. Now, and we can move on to all the different things that are here. But one thing I'll kind of call out that when we started to roll this out and talk to people about it, one thing you think about is, well, what does complete mean in this? How do I know when someone's gotten to the end? There is no end. It's continuous by definition of what's there. And how are we going to evaluate completion? It's different than how we've evaluated it in the past. Like, these sort of elements all become kind of really important to think about as we start to move through these new ways of teaching. And I'm not saying this tool is the way to replace all things. I think there's lots of different kind of learning interventions that will need to happen at different moments of learning need. But But this does start to get me at the like, okay, I want to spend some time to understand something, or oh, something's gone wrong. I just need to ask a question and get the information, or something's changed and I just need to know that delta that's there. So I think when you start to layer in this is sort of an agentic architecture of a lot of different agents doing their job to be able to display relevant information to Brett in this moment to teach him how to do something in there. So let me pause for a second and see if there's any questions. All text, no images. Like they're really active roles. Like, yeah. And Darren, your comment about moving learners from passive to active is an interesting one, because a lot of learning is very prescriptive. It's assigned to us. And if you put the burden on the learner to go do this, are they going to do it? And how do we know what they're going to do? And all of the elements that go around that. Now, one thing I will say that's really interesting when you look at the data you get here is when you start to develop the content at the point of consumption based on the needs and context that's around that, we now have learning analytics on what did people ask for? What did they get? What was served up to them? What was the engagement or interactions there? What did they ask questions about? We have a massive set of data now that lets us start to use that this is a very human moment, to continuously evaluate how we make this content better, or the knowledge better that this content is generated off of. So it's kind of rethinking that workflow of how do we start to develop content at scale. Let me, I'm going to look over here to the chat for a second. Yeah, the cognitive overhead is a very real thing. Kate, thanks for calling that out. And it's a thing we're very conscious of, but I think actually this overly text-heavy system won't be the future of it. I see this as an interim step as we kind of get towards the truly interactive, get the information I need in the moment of need, in the flow of work to get there. So I see kind of Gemini Live, and I imagine a lot of people in here have used Notebook LM or tools like that start to kind of get you there. I think it's a journey as we get there, and we're going to have the right governance systems and controls to build the trust. And that's actually the next part of the presentation. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing this really quickly, and I'm going to move back to my presentation. So give me 1 second, and I'll pull that back up. Hopefully that will work out. Oh, Alex on point. All right. So when we think about this, and I'll move past the video of this, we don't need to see it. I have that just as a backup. You never know if live things are going to work. Click past it. Come on. There we go. So as we think about this, I do think like there is a future that is much more autonomous than what I just showed. There was a lot of governance and constraints in both of those sort of systems that prevent the tools from going off the rails, staying in their lane of what they need to do. And because of that, you sacrifice some of the experience that a learner or someone might have there. But I think trust is really important here. I think it is the scaling constraint. I imagine a lot of us have heard that it's not the capability of the tool, it's the trust in what it returns, how it returns it, and when it returns that content that matters a lot. And how do we think about scaling that moment? And so I don't think it's a big bang kind of waterfall tactic. I think this is kind of incremental steps as we get there, and people come on this journey of starting to trust content that isn't pre-authored or pre-blessed by an organization that's there. Because we've all seen AI make stuff up. And it's all, by definition, it's going to always be able to make stuff up. The context stuff we're talking about is how you minimize that ability. You can never get rid of it fully, but how do you minimize it and ground it in the right areas of trust so that you can scale these sort of experiences? So I have pulled together a little bit of a trust checklist here of things we want to think about, and maybe even over communicate as we're doing this. What privacy and consent boundaries are we putting in here? Are we telling learners what we're tracking for them? or users of it? Are we telling them what data we're pulling to be able to generate this? Like, hey, if this is a sales coaching tool, hey, we're pulling your performance data from the CRM or from the HRIS system. Depending where you are in the world, there's people on this call from all over the world. Like, using personal information about an individual has some potential issues that we have to think about and consider as we kind of think about the tools that we're going here. The accuracy and attribution of the data. Like, how do we make sure that we have the right accurate information? This is the garbage in, garbage out. And how do we have the attribution that helps us build the trust? Is it from a vetted, trusted source? Do I know that Jenna generated this, and I trust that Jenna is an expert in this topic, or this organization or trusted third party does that? So I think being very clear about that and really focusing on that matters a lot. I think in any AI thing, you need to think about the fairness and harm prevention governance you put around that to make sure that there's equity in how it delivers it, what data it's using, and the bias that potentially can come from using these sort of tools. There's brand and culture consistency. We see this all the time as people have rushed to pilot and roll out lots of different AI tools. They all talk differently. They don't follow the goals, the culture, the tone, the style, all those things that are important. And that's a very disheartening and not very engaging experience if I'm going to one role play tool here, and then I have an AI leadership coach over here, and they talk totally different styles. They don't reference the same information. That consistency leads to the experience. And I think we can step into engineering that into the tools and techniques that we roll out. And then, of course, this came up before, the human in the loop, the auditability and escalation moments that we engineer into these experiences so that people can always kind of escalate up. They can audit it. You can start to understand why a tool did a specific thing, what it did, what did it serve up to specific people. You're there, Jenna. Yep, you were ahead of the curve here in this kind of thinking of this is really important, and we need to deliberately put these moments into what we do. These can't be an accident. And my challenge to this group is kind of just step into that. So this is kind of the Beatty title of the session was, I do think we're moving into a new role that we need to think about having, staffing, enabling in our organization of context architect. That's a hard one to say, but I think it's very relevant here, is that like, how do we make sure we have all those right elements as we start to roll out the different tools and tech, whether we're buying it off the shelf from third-party providers, we're asking the right questions about that, or we're building it ourselves. I'm sure there's people on this call that have vibe coded something. I think the new term is agentic engineering, but like have built something. And as you know, it takes minutes, and Google or Lovable or whatever tool you want to use can build an amazing app. But all those elements around it are needed to make those things scale. And how are you thinking about all of that? If not, we're going to end up with tons of just fragmented AI learning experiences that don't have a cohesive link to what the actual outcomes are. And it'll just be a new form of e-learning. I think I saw in the chat the concept of like, hey, what's going to happen to authoring tools? I don't know. I think they need to step up in this moment, because I do think a lot of pre-created content won't be the future. It won't allow us to get to those elements of scale that we have. You're going to sacrifice something if you're pre-authoring content. Now, I don't think all content will always be created on the point of need. I think in compliance, in a lot of areas, like there's going to have to be, at least initially, pre-created content that you're working off of. But you can also think of this as like contextually aware content. So take a single piece of content and now make 10 derivative pieces of work from that are relevant to a role, a region, a job function, a geography, like all of those things. AI allows us to scale those and go on that journey to getting there. So I hope people are excited about this. And I love if organizations start to kind of hire these roles to talk with you more about how you're kind of thinking about it. So like, what are 3 moves we can do to become an architect in this world? Let's say we start on Monday. I think this doesn't have to be a boil the ocean thing. I think you can pick one high value use case. Maybe it's coaching or onboarding or manager support. Just some of the ones we kind of called out here. Build out that context blueprint. We can send you an example of it. You can use the slides that are here. You can ask AI to build one for you. There's lots of those out there. But think about that. And then ship a pilot that has this kind of trust first mentality. Really lean into the trust and why we've done it, the provenance, the consent, the escalation baked in, those sort of moments. I think this is a very tactical thing that people can do. And that kind of 5 boxes of context. So however you want to kind of lay that out, like for that use case, what are the instructions? What are the prompts they should do? What are the outcomes that we're trying to get there? What knowledge does it have? What knowledge shouldn't it have? Where are we getting that knowledge? How is it going to get in there? And not just once, not just uploading the PDF. How does it continuously get in there? Because the PDF, as soon as we create one, is instantly out of date. How do we get to those real-time elements? How often is that updated? How do we build the systems that continually update that information for us? Some semblance of state, like what should AI remember when I come back to it? What memory do I want it to have? Sometimes you might not want it to have. Sometimes you might want to start over and have some semblance of knowing what that is. What tools can the AI access? Like, what do you want to integrate it with? Where should it sit? What should it have connections to be able to do its job effectively? Don't overthink that one. You could go crazy trying to wire agents into all of these different things in a pilot or even initial deployment. Those could be static data feeds. They don't have to be live access to tools. There's going to be a lot of fear around connecting tools or connecting AI agents into tools that have valuable company data. So again, you want to, I wouldn't go super deep on there initially, unless you have a really good relationship with your IT and infrastructure team. And then again, the policies. And I've mixed between the world of policies, governance, all of these, but this is where for us to step in as humans of like, what should it do? What shouldn't it do? Like, what must it respect to be able to deliver that experience? And I get the goosebumps as I talk about this moment. Like, this is what we need to do. Like, this is where we can step up into that moment and help make these experiences much, much more relevant with all of this information. So I do want to always offer this. It's unique to you all, but I love this a lot. I'm happy, and our team is happy to jump on calls with you free of charge to kind of think through one of these with you. Lay out one of those 5-box kind of things and what are the different systems that are there. So if I can be of help, I love talking about this stuff, and we have a team of people that love talking about it as well. So it's something that we offer, as I think it's important as we advance our industry and move our industry into leveraging AI at scale, that we think about this. And we are kind of happy to be there to help you kind of through this journey. So I won't kind of dwell on that, but I will kind of pause on a thank you slide. There's a QR code there that goes to my LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with people on this. And as planned, I left about 15 minutes for Q&A. So Alec, please feel free to come back on. Happy to kind of dive into things here. Any themes you're seeing in the chat? I've been trying to glance at it, but I've probably missed some things.
Yeah, the chat was rolling pretty quickly. So I'm gonna jump. I think you touched on most of the specific questions in the chat, but I'm gonna jump over into the Q&A tab.
I haven't looked at that at all. So yes, please.
No, it's okay. We only have a few in there. Most of the time, people submit in the chat. So the one that I have in here is from Valerie, that I think you might be able to add some clarity on, and it was in regards to RAG. So Valerie's question, Valerie's question is, so our organization has a confidentiality and retention policy that deletes all searches every 48 hours. Does that mean that it would lose all of its knowledge of me every time? Valerie's asking. Does that interfere with its ability to recall?
Potentially, yes. I think you need to scratch into that policy a little more and see like what semblance of what needs to, but if it's clearing all its context every time, context engineering becomes even more important there, to making sure every time it resets that you're able to inject back in as much information, as much context as possible to make that experience more relevant. If not, you'll just end up with a lot of really generic experiences from there. So, and happy to scratch at that more with you if you want to reach out to that.
Yeah, and then I did see some themes surrounding RAG, and I know you kind of went into it during the presentation, but people are just asking for a little more, in most simplest terms, can you explain RAG?
Sure, let's give it a shot here. So when you, in any tool, when you upload data to it, it's being parsed. So it's being chunked up into segments. Sometimes you might hear the term vectors or vector databases, but basically you can think of it as a tabular structure where it's kind of segmenting out the chunks of a huge piece of content that it wouldn't be able to put all into its context window at one time. So RAG is a technique where it grabs those fragments that it needs based on a complex scoring algorithm. Lucid, there's a whole science behind how it guesses those elements and brings and pulls that context in so it can use that data. So that's how like the SharePoint agents work. When you're pointing it at a SharePoint page, it uses a RAG technique to be able to grab stuff from the SharePoint pages that are relevant. Because one of the things you've all probably realized with AI too is if you feed it too much extra data, it can get confused. So part of context engineering is deciding what is the right data to give AI at the right moment to do its job. And that is, RAG is a technique that helps us do that. We could go deep on it, but I definitely want to help. That's hopefully that helps.
Okay.
It's a really technical thing, but it doesn't need to be.
I gotcha. So another question came in, and you might not have a specific example, but the question is, do you have any, or could you share an anecdote where data was available for a particular organization, but it was spread across multiple silos, and how that could have led to some difficulty in implementing a customized AI model?
Yeah. And I would, one thing I'll pick on the language there because the words matter here a lot. In most cases, we're not messing with the models. The models are pre-trained. We're using foundational models, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic or Gemini. So we're not training the models. We're providing the data, the context that it needs around those models to do those sort of things. So I just lost my train of thought. Alec, what was the source, the first part of that question? Sorry.
If you had any anecdotes where data was available, but it was spread
different sources.
Different sources spread across multiple.
I mean, absolutely. Like in most cases, like a lot of your performance support stuff lives in SharePoint or lives in the CRM. Your formal training lives in an LMS. Most people never say they ever want to LMS something, so they don't go to LMSs. So how do you get the data from those different places and put it into the flow of work? Now, everyone talks about flow of work being the magical thing, but you have to be sensitive of that because if you blow up someone's text messages or Teams messages or Slack messages, the signal to noise ratio matters there. They're going to start to ignore it eventually if it's not relevant. So that relevancy matters of when do you start to serve things up. So connecting to those different data sources, I don't think any large organization on here probably has all their stuff in one place. So that's going to be a part of that new job role I'm talking about, is like finding and locating those and figuring out how you consistently get data from those sources, if those are going to continue to be the sources of truth.
All right, another one come in while you're answering that. It comes from Robert. Robert's question is, how does one go about creating an adaptive learning AI model, and where is a good place or resource to start learning more?
I mean, if you haven't played with some of the Google tools, like the Notebook LM and tools like that, in Microsoft, they have a notebooks concept as well, where you can start to play with this idea of giving it a defined knowledge base and some semblance of a system prompt of like a set of behaviors. So some of those elements of context, and you can start to see where it falls over. where it creates generic stuff or where it creates wrong information. And then you can go back and engineer in checks into that to fix those problems. So it's very much a trial and error kind of thing. And there's lots of like free-ish tools that you can use to kind of start to play with that yourself. You can create GPTs in ChatGPT as well if you have a paid subscription. So there's lots of ways to do that.
All right, and we got one more here from Karen that you might be able to see in the chat. Can you explain one more time how this creates content scale?
Yeah, so the whole premise here is if you're going to start creating more contextualized content at scale, maybe you're going to use, let's say, Articulate's AI tools to scale the creation of e-learning, or PowerPoint Copilot to create those, or sales and coaching role play tools. Like if you're rolling that out globally, any of those sort of experiences, the tools are going to need the appropriate context to create the most relevant content for that person. So the semblance of this is think about those different elements of context and make sure that you engineer in ways that those tools get access to that so that they can create the most relevant content for that experience. Or if you move down to like a continuous learning agent kind of example, like I showed, that when it's creating it in real time, that it has the right information to do that effectively. Like that continuous learning agent thing, you could go simulate something like that in ChatGPT or Copilot today, and it will answer you and respond in a very similar way to I've done. But I would have no idea what data it's pulling from, what it's using, which way it's going. And every person that uses it might get served up different data based off of whatever extra context it might have on that individual. So that consistency and reliability of what's served up and how it's served up is the important part to helping create content at scale.
All right, we got time for maybe one more, everybody.
Right.
And this just came into the Q&A tab. It's from Aneta. An instructional design approach to creating the best learning experience for people at work is all about avoiding dumping large amounts of content on them and focusing on proper LNAs, or finding problems and challenges people face at work and providing customized solutions to help them overcome those challenges. How would this tool fit into that approach?
Well, I guess if you're talking about the continuous learning age, so I'm trying not to push a specific tool here. I think as you think about any tool, the context is how you get to what's relevant to that individual, like, and not just dumping them a whole hey, the MOOC style, like here's 10,000 courses on LinkedIn Learning. Go learn yourself and figure out what you need. That's learning insurance in kind of a way. Like yes, you can development insurance there, but I think there's an element of like what's there, and their coaching tools and their role play tools in LinkedIn Learning are helping kind of drive that extra relevance and context to it. So I think it's having that, knowing how do you get AI to know what a good learning consultant would push out in a discovery session, and how do you start to do that at scale? Because a good learning consultant is going to ask those right questions, is going to help you write the right learning objectives or right outcomes, is going to anchor that, is kind of doing that. So you could think about this as kind of building in that wisdom and expertise of like how to do good learning consulting to help architect these tools to be able to deliver that. And that's kind of what we've been doing inside of GP. We're probably the world's largest employer of, technical term here, learning people that do learning related activities. And we've been working with our learning consultants and our regular our instructional designers and all of that, and embedding that expertise into the tool of what does good look like. They're super critical of a lot of the things that this thing does. And that's how you get the tool to be better, is continuing to kind of tune that feedback and think of it less of a static asset and more of a system, and how you continue to tune that system so that the outputs become much more reliable and high quality.
All right. Well, Jeff, thank you. I'm going to officially release you from the hot seat.
Nice.
Now.
This was fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
All. This was a really engaged conversation. I really enjoyed it. And Alec, thank you so much for having us here.
Of course. Well, thank you. Obviously, we had a lot of chats coming, so this was great. We had a lot of people in here joining us, and I like seeing other attendees helping other attendees as they're trying to understand these concepts that they might not be fully familiar with. So Again, thank you to everybody for joining us, taking time out of your busy schedules. Thanks to you, Jeff. Always a pleasure to work with you and the team over at GP Strategies. Really enjoy working with you all, and we appreciate your continued support here at CLO. So again, everybody, this was being recorded. You're going to receive a link to that recording in a follow-up email, along with your HRCI insurance certification codes. We do have another webinar coming up with GP Strategies in the early summer. Not fully developed on the details on that, but keep an eye on your inbox and on our website for communications on that upcoming event. I believe we have it scheduled in June. So once that information is available, we will share it out to all of you. Hopefully you can join us for that one as well. But again, thank you all, and we'll see you on the next one.